So thank you. My name is Andy Clark. I'm the president of the league, and I'm delighted to be just the introducer or the beginning of the webinar that we're doing this year to present the insurance program information that I know is keenly awaited by all of you who are on the call and those who will listen to the recording, because the insurance program is clearly a critical part of the activities of most, if not all, of our affiliated clubs and advocacy organizations. Thanks to Scott for setting this up. Thanks to you all for being part of this, and thanks especially to Marla and Robin at American Specialty, who are going to run us through the program and tell us what the details are for this year as far as the insurance program is concerned. Some of you will have seen some of this or may be familiar with some of the material that Marla is going to present if you've been to one or two of the club or one or other of the club seminars that we've had in person. But the insurance topic is always able to bring new issues and new topics up, and so for many of us, me included, hearing this information for a second, third, fourth, or fifth time is well worth the investment. So we're looking forward to an informative presentation this evening from the folks at American Specialty. And without very much further ado, I'll hand it over to them. I do want to stress, if they're too modest to say it, that we have enjoyed a great relationship with them for the last 15 years or so. We enjoy working with the team from Roanoke, Indiana, and I would encourage you to listen through the presentation and save your questions until the end if you can, because I know that what often happens is that you're about a step or a question ahead of where the presentation will likely take us. So give the team from American Specialty a chance to describe the program, give us the new rates, talk about the nuances this year, and then we'll be able to have a good discussion and answer any questions that may come up. So with that, let me hand over to Marla and let you guys take it away.
Okay, thanks, Andy. I'm relieved that we have everything working on the technology side. We were a little scared for a minute, but I think we're all set. So it's great to be able to talk to so many people and at the same time show you our PowerPoint without having us all be in the same place. So I also have on the phone from American Specialty Renee Watterson and Robin Fagan, and many of you who are participating in the insurance program are probably familiar with Robin. She is actually transitioning into a new role at American Specialty, and so Renee will be taking over from her. But that should not give you pause or worry you in any way, because Renee actually managed the league's program in the past and is the director of the division at American Specialty that services all of our amateur sports accounts. So just to give you that introduction, you will be talking to Renee for the most part when you call in, and you can always feel free to contact me as well. Just to give you a little background, American Specialty as a company specializes exclusively in sports and entertainment insurance. So a lot of what we're talking about here, we like to think we're experts in, because that's all we do on the sports side. We, as Andy said, have worked with the league for many years. We actually began working together in 1992. There are over 500 clubs that participate in the program, so about 80% of the league's membership. And the program is available only to League of American Bicyclists member clubs. It's not available if you are not a member. One thing that's exciting to us is that about 3 years ago we allowed online enrollment in the program, and immediately clubs began using that. I think we had 75% the first couple years, and then this year it jumped up to 84%. So you guys are all technology savvy group, which is great. It's more efficient for you and us. We issue about 2,500 certificates of insurance. I'm sure many of you are familiar with municipalities or venues asking you to provide that evidence that you have coverage, and so that's a critical part of the program. And we are actually available 24/7. Hopefully you don't ever really need that service, but I know sometimes it does come in handy if there's a certificate that you've got a weekend event and maybe it got misplaced. Renee always has her cell phone for that, and then our claims staff also is available on that basis should something occur where you need to talk to somebody after hours. We're going to talk about two aspects of the league insurance program today. The first one is the one that you probably associate traditionally with the insurance program, and that's the general liability and participant accident coverage. And then a separate program that about 80 clubs are currently purchasing is directors and officers coverage. And so we'll talk a little bit about that. Some of your board members may have asked about that coverage and whether it's something you should have. So we'll try to give you some background and information on that. And also I would like to echo what Andy said. I apologize to any of you who've heard this all before, but I do think it's important to make sure anybody who's new has a frame of reference and kind of understands what we're talking about. So on the general liability side, first of all, what is that coverage? This is the coverage that everyone talks about when you are, you're worried about potentially getting sued because somebody gets hurt. Either one of your own members gets hurt or somebody, a spectator or maybe a bystander, passerby, ends up getting injured. That's probably the most common source of potential liability for a bicycle club. And this is the coverage that responds in the event that you are sued or are asked to make a payment because somebody believes that you were negligent and caused them an injury. We also have a sublimit, which we'll talk about the limits in a minute, for sports equipment liability. And what that is not necessarily, it's not coverage for your own bike if it's damaged. This is kind of a misunderstood concept. It's coverage if your club has the care or control of someone else's bicycle and it gets damaged and they are looking for reimbursement from you. We had an example of that where a ride official who was trying to be helpful actually moved a bike seemingly out of the way, but unfortunately into the path of an automobile, and it was subsequently damaged and caused the person to lose their bike, and it was an expensive bike, so the loss was about $3,000. Just to give you examples, and this isn't at all to be morbid or anything like that, but just to show you so you can understand the types of things and that this actually does provide important and critical protection. A few of the claims examples that we have had. One that is still ongoing right now, which is why it says $70+, was an example when a person participating on a ride on a bike actually struck someone who was walking on a trail. And it was, the trail was intended for pedestrians and bicyclists, but unfortunately this person got hit and had some pretty substantial injuries and also had previously suffered a stroke, and so the injuries were kind of exacerbated by that. So that is in litigation currently, and we're defending the club and the bicyclist that was involved in the collision. We had another example where a cyclist on a ride pulled into the path of a truck and subsequently sued the trucking company, but the trucking company then brought the club into the lawsuit, and so that had to be defended. And then another example of the type of thing that's covered by general liability is if you cause property damage to someone else's property. And in this example, a rider struck and damaged somebody's BMW, and so the repairs were about $7,000 to cover that. The policy covers the clubs who are enrolled in the program. It covers the members of the club and volunteers, and it also covers your directors, officers, and employees if you have employees. And the coverage applies during your recreational bicycle rides that are organized and conducted by the club. And it also covers your club meetings, just kind of your regular activities, any conventional fundraisers you do, and also time trials. And then if you have that base coverage in place, you're also able to schedule special events. And what we refer to as special events are those events that actually are open to the public and you are charging an entry fee. If those two factors apply, then the ride has to be scheduled as a separate event and separate premium is paid for that. The limits of coverage are $1 million per occurrence. There's additional $1 million limit available. A couple of clubs did partake of that last year, which was the first year we were able to offer that. And you're actually able to get that through a program that's in place through the league, which helps keep the cost down for that extra $1 million. There's a $3 million general aggregate, and that applies to each club and each special event. So even though everyone's insured under one policy, you each have your own annual limit that applies. Obviously, we have never had a club reach this level, which is a good thing, because if you had 3 $1 million claims, that would not be a good year, obviously. One thing that is very important is that defense costs are not part of that limit, meaning that they are in essence unlimited, and defense costs are the costs to pay your attorney to defend you in the lawsuit. And so a lot of times in these suits, that's where the bills really come into play. You may be found to have not been negligent, but in the meantime it may have cost $100,000 for the defense. And so that's when it's very important to have this type of insurance. And then the sports equipment liability we talked about has a $5,000 limit per occurrence and a $500 per claim deductible. A couple important things to think about. One thing that's always been of interest in our presentations and on these calls is waivers, because I know they can sometimes be controversial or people don't like to sign them. We basically think it's very important for each of your members each year to sign a waiver, and anytime you have a special event to have the participants sign a waiver. We get the question of, you know, do people need to sign a waiver every time they come to ride? No, we feel, in our professional opinion, that if you can get an annual waiver for your club members, that that's sufficient. We did add last year coverage for those clubs who are involved in bike refurbishment. We had one club take advantage of that last year, and we just want to make sure people, that clubs are aware that if you are doing bike refurbishment, it isn't automatically covered, and you would need to buy this enhancement to the policy, and the cost of it is around $50 for the year. So if you are engaged in that activity, that's an important coverage to think about. The policy doesn't cover commercial repair shops, commercially operated tours, or racing. On our last call, we did have some questions come up about timed events, and we are working on some policy language clarifications. Again, we're always trying to make sure we're keeping up with what the real world of cycling out there. And we know that some events involve a timed element, but they aren't necessarily racing. We do want to keep racing as far away from this policy as we can, because that coverage costs a lot more, and we don't want clubs who are primarily involved in recreational cycling to have those type of premiums. So that's why we have the exclusion, but we do know that timed events aren't by definition necessarily races. If you're doing it for personal best, or if you just have a period of time in which the event has to be completed, but you aren't head-to-head competing with other cyclists. And then also this year, this is new, we're going to be offering optional non-owned and hired auto coverage. It will be subject to individual underwriting based on the state you're in and your club's activities, but general liability coverage does not apply to accidents involving vehicles. So if someone is driving and injures somebody, that's the auto coverage, and so if your club is concerned with that, you can contact us separately and we can go through that with you. The cost is probably going to range from $250 upward for that coverage, and it doesn't cover the driver of the driver's own vehicle, but if somebody is driving on your behalf in their own vehicle and does cause an accident and your club gets sued as a result, that's when this coverage would come into play. And it would also apply if you are renting a car, if the club official is renting a car. So, okay, to switch gears, the other, question, I'm sorry, I need to pay attention to my screen. We did have a question about what is meant by bike refurbishment. What we mean there is basically you're getting a used bike and you're maybe doing some body work to it, like paint, that type of thing, and then you are maybe donating them to somebody, or you could even be selling them as a fundraiser type of thing for your club. In order to be eligible, your revenues have to be under $100,000 annually, I think.
Yes.
Which we haven't had any club that has, $100,000. That has not been an issue for the club that was involved in that. Okay, now switching gears to the participant accident, what we've been talking about is the coverage that applies if somebody is accusing you of wrongdoing or negligence and they're bringing a lawsuit. Now we're going to switch gears to somebody is injured on a ride or in a special event and they have their own medical bills, and this coverage, which the amateur sports industry calls participant accident coverage, applies to the medical bills resulting from that injury. It is excess over any other insurance that the person already has, so their health insurance coverage if they have it. But if someone doesn't have health insurance, then this policy pays their bills after the deductible of this policy is met. So it's very important. A lot of times these two, the general liability and the participant accident, are grouped together like this in amateur sports, because if you have that coverage to pay someone's medical bills that they may otherwise have to pay out of pocket, they may be less inclined to bring a lawsuit against you. So that would apply, for example, to someone on a special event ride or on one of your club members. It also provides an accidental death and dismemberment benefit. Let's see, I'm getting another question. Let's see. I think I'm not keeping up with the questions. Yes, we do have a recommended waiver form. That was a question that somebody asked going back to the general liability side. And it is on the website, which we'll give you the website information later in the call, and everything is contained in that one place, so you can access that easily. And then it is also on the league's website at their club corner. Some claim examples, you've had a chance to look at those. Again, just to give you an example that unfortunately people do get hurt when they're having fun, but it is important that you're able to provide this benefit to them to help offset their medical bills. The other thing I wanted to mention is if somebody does have their own health insurance, this policy can still pay their deductibles and co-pays after this policy's deductible is met, and with the large some people are carrying these days and the co-pays that apply, that can still be a really important benefit, and we sometimes can end up paying the full limit of the league's policy, which is $10,000, even when somebody does have other insurance. The policy applies to members of your club during your regular club rides, and also applies to time trials, and it applies to registered participants and volunteers of your special events if you purchase coverage for those special events like we talked about earlier. The limit is $10,000 per person per accident. It has a $500 deductible. And then the accidental death, and we'll just call it the accidental death, not dismemberment benefit, but that policy, or that coverage did have a $5,000 benefit, and the league increased that to $10,000 this year, so that is an enhancement to the program this year. In terms of purchasing the coverage, it can be purchased online, like we talked about. You can access it at this website that's shown on the screen, www.amerspec.com/LAB, or we also have a hard copy enrollment form that you can sign, you can fill out and send in. The benefit of purchasing coverage online is that once you do that online, you're also able to register your special events and request special event certificates online, so that's been a benefit to many clubs. We are also working on, although I don't think we're going to have it ready for February 1st, the ability for you to get your regular club certificates online, which right now those requests come to us. So that's going to involve a little bit of reworking of our website, and so we don't want to hold everything up for that, but sometime during the year that's probably going to come online and will be available in the future. Just another time saver, hopefully. The club premium that you pay is based on your number of members, and you pay it at the time that you enroll in the program. We do have another area, we have a separate pricing or a separate way we price the advocacy organizations, since they may have very large membership lists, but maybe only a few rides a year and maybe not many people actively participating in their members, more from a funding perspective. So advocacy organizations can pay premium just based on their active members. And we recently had a call with several advocacy organizations because we want to make sure that our program matches, or we can provide a program that matches some of the activities they're doing that are really more geared toward the education initiatives and those type of things. And so we're currently working with the league on that and hope to roll something out here in the near future. The special event premium is based on the number of participants, and this is unusual in insurance. It is actually paid after the event takes place, and the reason we do that is in the past we would have you pay an estimate, and then we'd have after your event, when you really knew how many people showed up, you would pay for the additional people, and that was kind of cumbersome and burdensome on the clubs, and we realized that we could go to more of this honor system, and we have not had any issues, and people have been great about paying their premium after the event, so we can continue to provide that each year, which is great. And the coverage starts at the time of payment, so if you don't sign up till April, your coverage won't start till April, but it will still end on February 1st because that's the policy renewal. So it really is to the league or to the club's benefit if you can sign up as close to February 1st or before February 1st. As possible. And if you sign up before that, coverage will actually start for next year on February 1st. The rates for this year, I won't read through them all, but I do want to let you know they are about 4% higher, so there was a slight increase this year, and we're still below where we were a few years ago because we had a significant decrease a few years ago of 15%. The minimum premiums are the same. The bike refurbishment premium is also the same if any of you decide to take advantage of that. One, we have on here at the bottom this optional participant accident coverage, which I didn't talk about yet. And this is something we added last year after getting some feedback from clubs, that sometimes you have events that are open to the general public, but you aren't charging a fee. And so you don't need, in order to have liability coverage, you don't need to pay for them separately or register them as special events because they don't meet that criteria. But if you don't schedule them separately as special events, the non-members who participate in those activities won't have any participant accident coverage. And if you would like those non-members to have that coverage for maybe this one-time event, we added this optional coverage, which has a $30 minimum premium and is an inexpensive way to provide that participant accident coverage for those non-members. An example of that, I know we had a rite of silence that was enrolled. We've had some education classes that maybe had an on-bike component where the club wanted to cover those non-members. And so I guess I should stop here and pause before we go on to directors and officers liability to see if there are any questions on that, kind of that core part of the program that you are all probably most familiar with.
Hi, this is Scott Williams from the League, and I've just got a couple of questions piled up here that I think would apply. I think one of them was covered just as you were talking about that PA insurance. Our annual Club Century ride is open to other clubs, but no fee is charged. Is it covered?
Yeah, it would be covered. It would be covered under the regular club program without registering it as a special event. But if they do want to extend the participant accident coverage to the non-members, which we think is a good idea, for the reasons we talked about it being a potential offset to liability, to be able to have that coverage there, then you can purchase that separate coverage. And you do that just by calling us. We don't have that automated online because the circumstances of each can be a little unique, so that you would actually call Renee and talk to her, and we would get it added to the policy.
Okay, let's see. Where is it? There was a question here. Can we use a check mark or agree box on our website? I would guess as part of the membership form is what the question is asking, to act as a signature for the waiver.
That is a question we get every year, and I just checked with the director of our litigation management department to see if there's any change in kind of precedent-setting litigation on that. We are not familiar with a case. There's not one that's gone to the Supreme Court to test the validity of a electronic signature on a waiver. And so, therefore, we can't definitively say. But what we do know that it's the reality that many clubs are using electronic means to register people. Our advice is always that if you are going to use an electronic signature, you try to tie it to some type of a financial transaction or something that identifies the person affirmatively as, in fact, the person who's enrolling. If that's not possible, it's just, again, the farther you get away from that, the more it diminishes your ability to use it as a defense tool. And then I have to make my I am not an attorney disclaimer, because I am not. But that's our company's official position on that question.
Okay, I see that Alan Forkosh from Grizzly Peak Cyclists has his hand up. Alan, did you have a question?
Yes, I do. Actually, I've got two that are not related to each other. One, our club this year is actually going to be doing some skills clinics that we're going to be charging for. We're going to have some non-members. Each one in total is probably going to be, probably going to have no more than, I'd say, 10 non-members per. Is there any way of trying to consider that one event so that we can pay them? And it's not clear to me. We're using the park district. It's not clear to me. Well, I guess since we're charging, it'll have to be a special event. But could it somehow be considered as one special event rather than multiple events?
That is something we should probably talk to you about separately. And we have had that. Yeah, we've had that come up before, and I can't remember. I think there's probably a way that we can work out something separate, which is what we often do when things don't fit within the parameters of everything that's set up to deal with 98% of what happens. There's always that other percentage that maybe falls a little outside. So we would be glad to talk to you about that and get the specifics from you.
Okay. One other. This came up from a ride our club ran last week. We had someone show up with an electrically assisted bicycle. Is there any problems with that in terms of insurance?
No, there's not. The policy does not have any restrictions or anything like that. I'm assuming, was that more for was it an accommodation for any physical reasons, or was it actually just?
I don't believe so. It was, we have some people who had this. It was I wasn't there. I was told it was a recumbent. Undoubtedly, someone showed up and wanted to show their new toy.
Right. Well, I can definitely say we don't have any restrictions in the policy relative to that. We usually, when something that actually hasn't come up before, to my knowledge, so we usually circle back with the league to make sure that that type of thing doesn't pose an issue, that's not in keeping with the league's mission and that type of thing. And if it's not, then usually there wouldn't be an issue.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Thanks, Alan. I see in here a few questions that are pretty specific that I'll probably take offline and try to answer. Just have us answer in another format, because there are a lot of questions here and some of them are pretty specific. I can see who asked them and get them to Marla. But one larger question, someone just wants some examples of the premiums and how the premiums work. Another question is 59 cents per participant for the entire year, which I think refers to some of the special event insurance. So do you want to just give some examples of premium payment and cover that a little bit more, Marla?
Sure. The way it works, to look at the rates for the first of all, you have to participate in the club program before you can register a special event. So your first cost that you would be looking at is if you have, for example, 100 members, then you are looking at multiplying 100 times the $1.55, and then if it is under the minimum premium of $83, you would pay the $83. If it's over the $83, then you would pay whatever amount that equaled. If you have over 1,000 members, you pay that $1.55 for the first 1,000, and then for anything over that, you're going to pay the $1.40, and that applies to the whole year. Then after that, if you have a special event, that you are going to register. It works the same way, but the premium is calculated for that special event, and again, that's paid afterward. You sign up before. That's critical. You have to tell us about the event before it happens in order to have coverage, but then you pay the premium based on the number of riders that participated in your special event after the fact.
If I can jump in here quick on that, Marla, one question that we had on that is this per participant fee for the non-members participating. Are the members already covered because of the premium if you've got a special event, or is it for every rider?
You don't have to count the members again. You just count the non-members.
Okay, great. Thanks for the clarification.
And then the optional PA coverage, I should say, that I wouldn't look at that as an annual premium because that's more of a one-off event. And again, we've had some situations come up where people ask, well, if I have a series of events, how's the minimum going to apply, similar to the question we previously had. And if it's not straightforward, it's not just a one-time ride where you're buying that optional participant accident coverage, we can talk through that and see what makes sense, the best way to cover it. Anything else on that, or should I, Scott, should I move on to the directors and officers?
Why don't you go on and move on to the directors and officers? We'll see what time we have left at the end and try to loop back to some of these things. And if we don't get to them all tonight, I will make Marla answer them tomorrow and email them out either to everyone or to the asker, depending on the circumstance. Does that sound good to you, Marla? I hope you didn't have anything planned for tomorrow.
Well, I'm supposed to be on a 6 a.m. flight, but it's already been canceled, so now I don't know what I'm doing tomorrow.
I can help. All right.
To be here down the fort and Robin anyway. So between us, we'll definitely get the questions answered.
Definitely.
Go ahead.
Okay. The directors and officers liability coverage, switching gears a little bit, it's kind of a often misunderstood coverage because you may have noticed when I was talking about general liability that I said that the directors and officers are covered under the general liability policy, and that is true. So the difference between the two coverages has more to do with what they cover as opposed to who they cover, because the general liability policy and the directors and officers policy both cover your board members. The difference is the directors and officers liability policy covers some things that aren't picked up under the general liability policy. It covers the board for their alleged wrongful acts, things like allegations of discrimination, wrongful termination, mismanagement of funds, or just general negligence in decision making. But it doesn't cover a claim of bodily injury. So the coverages are kind of designed to dovetail. Probably the most typical example we might see in amateur sports for a club that doesn't have employees would be where you may have to ask someone to leave the board, or you may have to ask a member to leave the club membership for some reason, and they bring an allegation of wrongdoing against the board relative to that decision. That's probably the most typical. In the world of directors and officers coverage overall, there's usually two elements. There's that piece, and then there's a piece called employment practices liability. And if you have employees, the most common type of claim we see under these policies has to do with wrongful termination and failure to promote, those type of employee-related issues. This policy covers the club that enrolls its board of directors and its volunteers. You can either purchase a $1 million or $2 million option. It does have a retention or a deductible, which is $500 for the directors and officers part and $1,000 for the employment practices part. There's those two pieces that apply under this coverage. That coverage has to be purchased online. It begins the day following the purchase, and it's actually prorated, so it's different from the club general liability and participant accident that we talked about, because this you will just pay for it as of the date you enroll through February 1, 2012. And the premium is $550 for the $1 million limit and $850 for the $2 million limit, and then there is a $25 fee that applies in addition. And then the last topic we wanted to cover quickly is that the league also provides coverage for LCIs. So if we have any LCIs on the phone or clubs that have LCIs who teach classes for them or anything like that, the general liability policy does cover the LCI anytime they are conducting a smart cycling seminar or any class that they are conducting in accordance with league procedures. The coverage applies to them automatically. They don't need to purchase anything separately. That's covered through the league. And if the LCI needs proof of insurance, for example, if they're using a venue to teach a class and that venue is asking for proof of coverage, you get that through, it will be Renee Watterson at American Specialty, and we're able to issue that certificate for you pretty quickly. The LCIs do not have participant accident coverage. The league did add coverage for them specifically during league-conducted seminars. That's new this year, but it doesn't cover them when they're out in the field doing their own classes, and it also doesn't provide coverage to the participants in those classes. So this is coverage just for the LCI for liability if they are sued as a result of their teaching activities or something that happens during class for bodily injury. And that is my last slide. Did we have some questions?
Yes, I have a couple of questions about the directors and officers before we loop back to the other insurance. Someone asked to make sure that is the executive director covered by the directors and officers insurance?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. And have you ever paid any claims under the directors and officers insurance?
We have not, for the league specifically, had any directors and officers claims, but in my experience with American Specialty, we definitely have had examples of directors and officers liability claims. One I can think of off the top of my head, just to give you a real-life example, is a claim involving a person who needed a special accommodation to play a sport, and the organization felt that it posed a hazard to the player and to potentially other participants and said that she was not able to participate, and then that person's family sued the amateur sports organization basically for the right to play. And that's something we frequently see in amateur sports. I don't know that that has the same applicability to the league, but that's just to give you an example.
Okay. Someone wanted to see the rates for the premiums for the D&O coverage again. Could you page back up to that? And let's see, here's a question. Does directors and officers cover the club on behalf of the board, or does it cover the board individually?
It covers the club as an entity, so as an organization, and it covers the board members as individuals. So both. Both.
Okay. In terms of the LCI insurance, is there a policy to cover participants in Traffic Skills 101 classes? I believe that's exactly what the LCI coverage offers. Am I right, Marlon?
Well, the LCI coverage that's automatically provided only covers the individual instructor relative to liability.
Okay.
They could potentially, I think, purchase that optional participant accident coverage if they wanted to cover the participants in the class.
Okay, so no coverage for the participants, but if the participants make a claim against the instructor, then the instructor's coverage.
Right, so not the automatic participant accident paying the medical bills, but if somebody sues the instructor, then the instructor would have coverage for defense costs and any potential judgment against him or her.
Okay. Let's see, I'm just reviewing the questions here to see if there's anything more about directors and officers. Is an LCI covered after the fact for something the LCI taught during a class? Someone gets injured riding in traffic while using principles that a person learned in a class.
Yeah, if the person is being sued as a result of something they did, while they were acting in accordance with league guidelines using their LCI training, and somebody gets hurt later and says it was your fault because you told me something incorrect during class a month ago, that would be covered. If it's a bodily injury type of claim, there would be a defense provided. A lot of times that area, people will call it professional liability, and it causes a lot of confusion. Some companies tout it as its own thing. American Specialty's view on that is that if it's a bodily injury claim, it's a general liability claim, and it's picked up that way. But there can be some confusion out there just that our industry causes by using different terminology and putting different restrictions on the policy. But no, we don't have anything restricting coverage from a claim that results from an accident later.
Okay, I have a question here from Chuck Smith. Chuck, did you have something you wanted to ask about the insurance? Are you there, Chuck? See your hand up. Okay, let me see. Craig Geivert, do you have a question? You're unmuted there, Craig. You got something?
No, I typed the question in, and it had to do with the insurance form online. I mean, we like using that, but I have a lot of trouble with it. Sometimes I don't have the person's health insurance number, for example, and then I can't submit it because it requires it.
So you'd like the form to be a little bit more forgiving and allow submission of partial information so that you can get it in and then fill in the details later?
Precisely.
Okay. Marla?
So that you're talking about the incident when you're reporting a claim?
Yes.
Okay. That is something we can look into. The reason we have some of those required fields up front is just because we will not be able to proceed in managing the claim without the information, and so we try to get it up front so it doesn't cause a further delay later. But it is something that we can look into with the claims department and see if that's a change we can make.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Also, with the hand up and a question to ask out loud, I think Doug Cutter, are you there? Do you have a question, Doug? I can't hear you, Doug. I do see that Doug submitted a question. What about organizational liability for sponsoring an LCI instructed class? Does the club need a separate policy, or is this covered in the general liability policy?
You wouldn't need separate coverage necessarily for that if your club is just being you're putting it on, because that would be considered a bicycling related activity. So you wouldn't need to have, but if the club is charging for it and it's open to the public, then that would fall outside the regular club activity coverage. And it's an interesting thing because I don't know if clubs usually charge participants and use that as a means to make money or not. I suppose it varies. So that's the element you always have to look at with your regular club activities, is if it meets the open to the public and a fee is charged definition, then it kicks it into the special event realm.
Okay, and I have a question from John Parker. John, do you have a question? See your hand up. Hello? Okay. Let me get back to questions that I have here in front of me. When non-club members show up to ride on a routine club ride, if they sign a waiver, are they covered for medical bills? Are club members who may be leading the ride covered under the general liability if a non-member gets hurt? And there's one more question in this batch, but I'll let you start with those.
Okay, so if people show up to a ride, a regular club ride, and they aren't members, if they are a first-time rider, they are covered. And who's going to tell us if they're a first-time rider would be the club, an official of the club. We were going to rely on you to tell us that if a claim occurs. If they are someone who routinely shows up and rides with the club, but they just never become a member, then they would not be covered. So basically on their second ride as a non-member, they would not be covered. And one of the reasons for that, I mean, there's two reasons. One is that the premium is based on your members, and so with the idea that that's reflective of who's participating on your rides. But the other reason is that we want to hopefully have the insurance be a positive and help serve as an incentive for people to join your club instead of just showing up and never becoming a member. And so we actually do have, and Scott has some language that one of the clubs had worked with us last year to put together that he actually sends out as part of his club materials that talks about how insurance can benefit the individual member and why you would want to be a member in order to avail yourself of that. So that's the answer to that. And then if, for the second part, if one of these non-members, even if it's someone who shows up ride after ride and never becomes a member, gets hurt, if they sue the club or they sue the ride leader, the club and the ride leader still have the coverage. So their coverage isn't compromised because everyone on the ride isn't a member. Again, assuming it's, the only time that wouldn't be true is if it's open to non-members and you're charging and you didn't register it as a special event. That's the only time that there'd be that issue.
Okay, and also in the same batch of questions, do we have an accident reporting form that we recommend they use to collect all the information needed for a claim? I'm thinking something that goes on a clipboard to every club ride and event. Do we have something like that? I'm not sure.
We would recommend using our incident report form, which is online, and that's you can print it or you can use the online version, which is what the gentleman previously had mentioned. We had some required fields that maybe we should take a look at, but that's the form we would recommend because we use that at American Specialty for both the participant accident and potential liability claims. So if one of those comes in as a participant accident claim, but it's a serious injury, that actually gets sent over to our liability claims adjusters to look at, do we need to do any type of an investigation because we think this might result in an actual lawsuit or something of that type. So that's the form which is available online we would recommend.
Okay, a couple of questions then regarding racing activities. While races aren't covered, are race practices, are practice rides for a race team covered if there's a team affiliated with the club? No. And does any of the insurance cover any sort of racing activity?
No.
Okay. I hope that is enough information on the racing questions. If we, anything on this we can cover more, Marla and her staff are very open to answering questions, so I'm trying to get through this. Bouncing back to the directors and officers insurance, the limit that was given, is that per director/officer, or is it a aggregate for the club as a whole?
That's an aggregate, and it's an annual aggregate. So if you buy the $1 million, then it is $1 million for any particular occurrence and also $1 million total for the year. Or if you buy the $2 million, same thing. It's $2 million for any one lawsuit or in the aggregate if there were multiple situations during the year.
Okay, here's a question. Do most clubs have their members sign a waiver once a year or use a waiver form with lots of signature lines at the bottom for each ride? And do you care?
I don't know what the majority do. I think we make both forms available online, and so it really depends on how the club is set up and how you operate, which one works best for you. We feel that they're both equally valid as long as you are, making sure that people who are signing them are, you know them to be the person they are, or you have an ID provided at the time they're signing it. Either one of those could work.
Okay, just to let people hear from someone but me for a little while, Ron Pewitt, who's presented at a number of our webinars, has his hand up. Hey, Ron, what's your question?
Yes, if we have a claim submitted, can you step us through the process of who does what? Is it the accident victim's responsibility to submit a claim or to contact you? Does American Specialty contact the individual? Can you step us through that process?
I can, although I probably can't do it as well as one of our claims adjusters could, but the main key thing is that the club needs to report it because we require an official representative of the club to sign off so that we know that it was in fact an official activity. So even if someone did get the form and report it to us directly, we would need a signature from an official of the club. But then from there, if it's a participant accident claim, the club won't need to be involved in, bills being processed through you or anything like that, because you wouldn't want that because of HIPAA protections. And but it's just that we need the club's involvement at the outset to confirm that this was a member and to confirm that this was a covered event and that type of thing. And you were talking about on the participant accident side, right?
Yes, and I guess my question is, if a person has a deductible, do you contact them, or should we instruct the person that has an accident to submit anything to you?
Once you report it to us as the club and confirm that it is a valid claim, then we will work directly with the person from there. So we'll be talking to them about their policy's deductible and working with their primary insurer and all that. The club won't need to be involved with that.
Okay. Moving on, let's see. I had one question asking about non-biking volunteers for events. Do those non-biking volunteers need to be included in the participant count? And how are they covered?
If it is a special event, and so it's somebody that's providing volunteer services, they are covered and should be counted in the participation numbers, and they are covered for a special event for if they're injured. So if somebody were to run into them, for example, or they tripped over something when they were setting things up, that type of thing, that would be covered for that volunteer. For a special event.
Okay, and that reminds me, just there were a couple of questions wanting to make sure that in buying a special event insurance, making sure they understood you to say that the participant count for which you need to pay is only for non-members. Whether it's just a special event or not, members are already covered as part of the larger policy. Do I have that right?
Yes.
Okay.
That is correct.
You never need to pay another time for members.
That's right.
Okay. And so let's see, I think that covers that. One question regarding indoor cycling classes. This time of year, some people take it inside and do activities on stationary bicycles at a health club or other facility. So how is that covered? How does that fit in?
That is a question. We've had a couple questions about spinning classes, and I don't think we have a blanket answer yet. It's probably one of those where we would potentially be circling back with you. If it's something, I'd say the first one that came up, it was a class at a YMCA, but it was taught by one of the club's member ride leaders, and it was only open to the members, and there was no cost assessed by the club for the spinning class, and we determined that that would fall within the regular club activities type of definition. But then we recently had another question come in, and we are trying to understand the circumstances of that one because they might be a little different, and so it might not be the same answer. If a fee is being charged or something like that. So, but I think so it's not the being on a stationary bike in and of itself, but it's kind of do the other parameters of the program apply. We want to apply them the same way that we do for outside cycling activities. The reason that it gives us a little pause, for example, is because if you're using another entity's facility or venue, we want to talk a little bit through, what their requirements requirements are, and are they making money off of it, and what's the relationship. It just changes the dynamics a little bit compared to an on-road type of activity when you have a gym or another facility involved and you're using their equipment and all that.
Yeah, I would say as a general rule, one of the first things I was told when I started the league is if it's an insurance question, call American Specialty. So if you have, I guess, for all of these things, if you have questions about your activities and just want to make sure that everything lines up and you're handling it the right way and that the coverage is there that you expect, always just call Marla or her staff, Renee. They never sound bothered. They never sound like they don't have time for you. They always want to answer the questions and make sure that you feel secure, that you have the coverage that you want, and that things are done by the book so that you do have the coverage. A few more questions here. Well, plenty more questions. We'll see how many we get to. Apparently, occasionally, some clubs, there are activities, and this is serious, where alcohol is involved in activities. If a rider is drinking and a rider gets hurt, how is this handled by insurance?
The general liability policy has an exclusion if you are in the business of selling, furnishing, or distributing alcohol. But that means that if you aren't in the business of selling, furnishing, or distributing alcohol, there is coverage if a lawsuit results or an injury results and it's related to alcohol consumption. What we recommend, and this is another one where a lot of times you might want to just call us and walk through the specifics. If the club is making any money from the sale of alcohol, then you get into that gray area where you may be in the business of selling alcohol for the purposes of the policy, and so then you can purchase liquor liability coverage. And it's not an expensive coverage, and it's something that we can provide. I don't think we've had many clubs through LAB purchase that, but we do have other nonprofit amateur sports type of clubs that do purchase that sometimes. The best case scenario to make sure you're under that host liquor liability coverage and don't need separate coverage is to make sure someone else is serving it. If any money's to be made, that someone else is making it. If there are any permits that need to be pulled, that someone else is pulling those. All those things help insulate you and make sure you have the coverage. When you get outside of that, that's when you should give us a call and we'll just walk through and see what we think, how things might apply for that situation.
Okay, one question, just clarification going back to something that I think is a change this year. Somebody wanted to talk about how whether time trials can be covered as special events. I guess if you're doing a time trial that involves non-members. Do you want to talk about the time trials again quickly?
Yeah, we are, I believe so. In the past it was not the case. You couldn't schedule a time trial as a special event, but we just talked to the league about that at this year's renewal, and I am working right now on language which we'll need to make sure that the league approves to allow for that. So I'm going to say 99.9% yes, you will be able to do that.
Okay. Let's see. Special events. Somebody asking about a training camp. Is a training camp covered as a special event? Cindy, you might want to send me some clarification for that just to make sure I understand. I'm guessing that maybe what Cindy means by that is if you're gearing up to a big ride, you've got a special event that's a big ride of some sort, and you're doing training camp before that. How is that handled? And if that's not the question, Cindy, please send me clarification.
Right, and if it's I know one thing we didn't contemplate covering under the LAB policy would be, for example, a youth camp that involved overnights or anything like that. We don't have a specific restriction in the policy regarding that, but I think we were just under the impression that wasn't really part of what clubs were doing. So again, that would be, if there's anything like that, it would be something we should talk about yeah, it's probably one that falls in that area.
Okay, here's another question just in terms of payment of premiums. There are a lot of clubs that have members who don't bike. Maybe they used to bike and just don't do it anymore, but continue to support the club and continue to be members because they like the connection to the community. Is there a way that clubs can structure their dues in such a way that they don't have to pay insurance premiums for people who aren't actually participating in the covered activities?
Well, like I mentioned before, if it's an advocacy organization, and maybe the lines can sometimes be not as black and white between an advocacy organization and a club, but they only pay on the basis of their active members. But we don't have anything set up for that for the clubs per se. If you had some separate category of people who aren't really members but they're just donors, I think then we wouldn't, if they don't participate in anything and they're just a donor, I think if you designate them as that as opposed to a member, then that would be in keeping with the spirit of how the premium is determined. Again, there's, nobody comes in and audits and looks at, who was enrolled or gets your books out and looks at all that. So if truly there are certain people who are really donors and not members, then we wouldn't necessarily expect that you would count them. But you'd want to have a way to differentiate that, I think, for bookkeeping purposes.
Okay, I have a little bit of clarification on the training camp question. Two scenarios about what the training camp might mean. Tulsa Bicycle Club has a series of rides starting at 5 miles and building up to 70 miles, 2 rides a week to help riders prepare for the Oklahoma Freewheel. Would each training ride be considered a special event?
If it's open to the public and a fee is charged, it is a special event. If it's just open to the public but the fee isn't charged and the club is putting it on, then there is coverage for the club. But again, it's going to, if there's a lot of non-members there, you're going to fall in that category, that place where those non-members don't have any participant accident coverage, and again could be the most likely people to sue you if they get hurt. So you might want to think about that optional participant accident coverage.
On a per ride basis, each one would be a special event, is what you're saying. Is that right?
Well, if a fee is charged and it's open to the public, each one would be a special event.
Right. Okay. No fee is charged, but I think it is open to non-members.
So the way it's set up right now with the optional participant accident coverage, each of those days would be considered, assuming that different people might show up and it's a different kind of dynamic each time, the minimum premium would apply each time to each event. If there's some reason we might look at that differently, or the club thinks that there's a reason that we might look at it differently, we can talk separately about that with them.
Okay, call Marla and make your case. It sounds like at that point it might be less expensive for just to have them become members and pay the fee. But call Marla, I think, is probably the best answer. Call Renee, and then also another situation on a training camp might be a group of club riders going somewhere for a weekend or for a week of training for the upcoming season. Typically, racers or competitive riders might do this, but it could just be a bunch of people going out and taking a trip to get in shape after the winter break.
If another entity or organization is putting on the training camp, then the club's coverage and the participant accident won't extend to that. In that case, we would recommend that the place that you're going, that you would ask them about what type of insurance they have and are providing for the participants in their camp.
And others, another clarification on that, you might be doing it just to get acclimated at climate, going to another altitude to begin to train for a high altitude event. let me see what else I can give you here. Again, we'll review the list of questions that were asked and make sure that we covered everything and try to provide a list of answers within a few days. One question just in terms of the premium payment, it's $1.55 a member, but often during the year a club is going to change the number of members. A growing club might have twice as many members at the end of the year as they do at the beginning. How do you handle club growth during the insurance year?
We just ask that at the time that the club enrolls that they base the premium on the number of members they anticipate during the course of the year. So we don't audit or ask for additional premium to be paid during the year. So if it's a very new club and you just don't know, it's really based on doing your best estimate.
Okay. Here is a question. We are considering hosting a community event with the city of Sacramento and expect 20,000 to 30,000 participants. There is not a fee. It's a no-charge event. If the city doesn't insure it, will they require optional PA coverage? And once the numbers get up that high, is there a lower rate?
I would say that is one we should talk separately about because there'll be all sorts of different circumstances involved in what the city's doing and what the club is doing and just things that we probably want to talk through. And it might be a whole separate event or a special event type of policy that would apply to something like that as opposed to something through the league's program. I mean, it just depends, I guess, but that is a very large event, needless to say. All sorts of different circumstances become involved when you have those type of large crowd numbers from an insurance standpoint.
Let's see, just a clarification from earlier. It looks as though the excess medical coverage limit has been raised to $10,000 from $5,000 with a $500 deductible. Is this correct?
The accident medical limit was already $10,000. The one that was increased is the accidental death benefit, and that was increased from $5,000 to $10,000.
Okay. The question on how you count your members, the club offers family memberships. Do we pay the $1.55 or applicable rate for each member of the family, even if some of the family members aren't regular riders?
I think we say to count, for a family membership, to count 2 people. Oh, yep. Family membership counts as 2 individual memberships for the purpose of insurance. So if you get the duck in there, then you'll be good to go with only paying the 2 membership premium, the 2 member premium. I may try not to laugh at my jokes.
Let's see. Club tours, a question about club tours. Organized tours of a week or more to other areas open only to club members. Is this a special event or a regular club event? A fee is being charged.
If it's only open to members, then it can be a regular, it would be considered one of your regular club activities, even if you charge a fee. The special event is an and, so it's the open to the public and a fee is charged. Makes it a special event. If either one of those factors but not both is present, it can be part of just your regular club activities. And with this one, you wouldn't need to be worried about the optional participant accident because it's only the members who are participating, and so they already would have the participant accident coverage.
Would this be true even if the tour were in another country?
We actually, and I'm not sure if the person who asked is someone we're already talking with or if it's another example of a similar circumstance, but we have had that question, and we're talking through that again because we didn't anticipate out-of-country exposure under the league's policy, And so I believe we're gathering some additional information in order to answer that. And there's a lot of other elements that can come into play, like other insurance. You might want the participants to have travel accident insurance or coverage if they need to be medically evacuated back to the U.S., which can cost like $100,000, and those type of things, which wouldn't necessarily be contemplated under the league's program.
Okay,
so
just...
the person who asked isn't the person that we're already talking to, we should probably have a discussion on that as well, and then maybe we can get a consistent answer to that. I don't know how widespread that practice is, or if these are kind of one-off scenarios.
Okay, I have a pile of questions in front of me. I hope that we've covered most of them, at least in broad outline, but we're going to review these questions and anything we didn't get to or that we want to clarify on, or maybe that we got to and where you think we'll get the question again. We'll pull those answers together and we'll let you know. I think at this point I'll go ahead and wrap it up. I don't know if Marla or Andy wants to say anything more before we close. But again, we'll try to answer these questions. The slides will be available on the Club Corner portion of our website, as well as a recording of the program. The recording may even be up this evening, depending on whether my technology is cooperating. Otherwise, I'll have it up tomorrow. Marla, anything else to say before we go? Do you want to remind people about renewal dates and how they pay and things like that?
Well, February 1st is the renewal date. Right now we have the website offline, and we are working on getting the brochure updated and a few final tweaks, like I mentioned, with the wording pertaining to timed events. And we were hoping to have that website up next Monday. I don't know if that's going to happen, but definitely next week we will have it up there so that people will be able to renew before February 1st. And we will be sending out an email to let everyone know that that is up and running and available to all of the current participants in the program as well. So using the email that we have on file for you, we'll be sending that out. The only other thing I'd like to say is just thank you to everyone for working with American Specialty. We love working with the league. We're honored that we've had the opportunity to do that for so many years and hope to be able to continue in that role. And like Scott and Andy have both said, feel free to call us with any questions. This is what we love to do. This is what we do. So that's why we're here, and we would not mind hearing from you at all with your questions.
Andy, have anything to add?
I would just add my word of thanks to everyone for participating and to the American Specialty team. We're happy to provide this and be able to provide this as a benefit to league clubs. We encourage you to tell other clubs who may not be members or who may not use the insurance program how it works for you, and share the good information, good coverage, and good rates that we're offering. And continue to tell us when things change and if you need new, extra, different, alternative coverage, if you're doing different things that maybe are not contemplated by the program. We have been able to work with American Specialty to improve and refine and create new offerings, and we'll continue to do that in the future. We can only do that as long as you all keep asking us questions and keep coming up with different permutations of what clubs are doing and advocacy groups are doing. So keep on doing that. Keep asking us to improve the product, and we'll endeavor to do so. And thanks very much for being with us this evening.
Okay, thanks a lot, and good night, everyone.